The billion-dollar Western yoga industry is full of teachers who haven't yet been students. Can you imagine taking on the mantle of teacher without being rooted in the cultural and spiritual practice itself? Without even knowing or understanding yoga's context and roots and purpose? And no, yoga is not fitness, not exercises, and not poses. But because of the colonial mentality to take out of entitlement, this is what yoga is mistaken for today in the West, and it's being sold back to its land of origin, Bharat, sold back in a diluted form. Welcome to the Prana and Poetry Pod, Season 3, Episode 4. Those of us longing to reconnect with our culture, aspects of which were ridiculed and banned through the invaders and colonizers, are having to learn back bastardized forms of our own culture, learning from self-appointed authorities and outsiders of our culture, continuing the self-alienation which was always the goal of those who came to steal and oppress indigenous people. So on my unlearning journey, my uncolonization journey, I sought out native teachers, and to be honest, it will take me a lifetime to unlearn the predator's way of being, to unlearn the corruption. Even though I teach physical classes, I know that I am a student practitioner, and I will first and foremost be a sadhaka. I can't even express how grateful I am for the conscious decision I made to learn back holistic, authentic teachings that nurture and nourish my body, mind, and spirit. I actually feel sad for those who continue to equate yoga with movement, those who get addicted to going to studio classes for the feeling at the end of the 45 to 60 minutes of class. It's an addiction, an attachment, and that is the opposite of the aim of yoga, which is moksha. I'm not denying the health benefits of movement, but the mistake is in believing that yoga is a set of postures added in with some, quote, breath work and, quote, mindfulness meditation. You lost me at mindfulness, by the way. A heavily appropriated and whitewashed concept, one that doesn't give credit to the traditional sources it's stolen from. So out of the 4 purusharthas, the aims or goals of life for a Sanatani or Hindu, is moksha, and yoga is the darshana that comes under this category. Yoga is a moksha sadhana. Without the correct methodology, without an authentic teacher rooted in a lineage where knowledge and practice has been preserved through thousands of years, yoga is going to continue to be corrupted and diluted and molded into colonial capitalist forms. What we have today are more forms of Maya, more self-delusion. It angers me because those of us from the original culture are excluded from teaching spaces, not offered the same privileges and opportunities, let alone platforms for visibility in our own cultural practices. It's infuriating. Anyway, I've been avoiding recording this episode because when it comes to the lens of decoloniality, I just don't have anything good to say. I'm really just fed up of feeling the discomfort of seeing and living the injustice, the silencing, the Hindu phobia, the bypassing and gaslighting of my own culture. Just a few steps away from me is an inaccessible yoga studio that decorates their front entrance with a Hindu deity. Yet yoga is not religion, they say. It's not Hindu. Give me a fucking break. What utter gaslighting. I stay away from said yoga classes because I don't do stupid. I can't stand stupidity. Also, they've set up their hiring parameters in such a way that unless you know a yoga teacher from that studio culture, and I'm going to say they're mostly white, it is impossible to apply to work there. And I've heard many stories of racial exclusion from bipoc teachers attempting to apply there, and most of us, if not all of us, are highly overqualified. Hiring for them is about popularity and optics, not depth. And again, let's question who is given the privilege of visibility and opportunity. And let's not go into the terror of a brown authority, the fear of the other. It's so old. When are individuals going to look at the fear within and grow up? Last year, a wonderful native teacher, a storehouse of treasure, offered the idea to us in a class that one could just be an example of living yoga. Just live yoga. Be the example, she said. Instead of speaking out against the injustices, instead of enduring a battle. Instead of wasting time and energy in defending yoga, just be the example of it. I can't tell you how much I wish I could be that person, but my body says no, not right now. I feel the hurt and pain, the need to protect Dharma, to uphold the truth, to be a dharmic warrior. That has always been my mission, to live authentically. And if I don't speak my truth, I feel it as a self-betrayal. And I have been silent for too long, betrayed my truth for too long, enduring all of the colonial systems of harm. And when it comes to those taking from Hindu culture, Hindu Dharma, that is just too close to home. It's insulting. And you know what's even worse? The colonizer mentality that exists in those who originate from the Indian subcontinent. These are the folks who give outsiders of the culture permission to continue butchering our knowledge and practices, permission to see our indigenous practices through the lens of patriarchy, for example, all because they have not themselves done the decolonial healing work, the work to unlearn history, cultural knowledge, or from the invader's perspective. They have not put in the effort to learn from indigenous teachings and the work to uncolonize body, mind, and spirit. This is because Dharma has been lost to that person's family, community, and upbringing, which I have deep compassion for. But why would you not question your sources? Why believe the fantasy and lies about your own culture that is constructed by outsiders of it, by the original oppressors? Unless the colonized person does their research and cultivates the ability to think independently and be in community with those who are doing the work to unlearn and relearn their indigenous culture, they're going to continue the self-loathing and hatred of their original culture and ancestral land, which is the goal of the colonizers. It's an easy but cunning way to justify theft and looting of culture. And I've had experience coaching and being in community with many individuals from colonized cultures who are aching to know their ancestral origins, aching to know their roots, the grief in that, the grief of rootlessness. And yet here we are as children of Bharat Mata. We hold the gift of Dharma ancestrally. And many are all too ready to give it up in the dark world of colonial conditioning and political propaganda. Western academia is a colonial institution, and I'm glad I left it long behind. I spent years in academia aiming to become a researcher until I was awakened, quite brutally, to the truth. And maybe that's a story for another day. But you won't get true history from here, or true yogic knowledge. You'll get books by fanboys positioning themselves as experts and creating a particular narrative about India, its culture and philosophies that suit their agenda of entitlement and white saviorism. No thanks. To practice yoga is to be a seeker. And that's where someone disconnected from themselves, from their roots and origins, can begin. What are you without your foundation? Sanatana Dharma and all indigenous cultures recognize the importance of cultivating a relationship with our roots, our ancestors, and how crucial this is for the healing and transformation of karma and for attaining moksha, the goal of yoga. A yoga sadhaka, a disciplined student practitioner, is one who questions, inquires, reflects, and comes to know their place in the universe, builds a relationship with all that is. The framework of yoga is always dharma, doing one's duty, acting in accordance with the laws of nature and one's own nature. If you remember in the Mahabharata, in the chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna to fight because that is his dharma, because his nature is of a warrior. You can run from the truth as much as you want, but you can never outrun your authentic nature. Yoga for the Hindu is a way of life. It exists in the fabric of all that we do. Our reverence to the natural world, our many rituals, our daily puja, our mantras, our bhakti, our shraddha. It is part of who we are and how we are. And I'm also very aware that yoga also stems from other dharmic traditions, just in case you assume unawareness on my part. But Sanatan Dharma is the root. White yoga is so far removed from this truth. Speaking of which, there is a great resource you can look at. There are a series of articles under the title of Healing from White Yoga, and it's in my Dharma and Decolonial Toolkit, a list of relevant books, articles, and podcasts which you can download and access for free. Link is in the description box. Another great resource is Zarna Joshi's 1000 Years of Hindu Colonial Trauma video series, again listed in my toolkit. This disconnection from one's rooted and nourishing cultural knowledge from one's ancestors is what is contributing to the unwellness that leads to appropriation in Western wellness spaces. And I've encountered many lost souls who are like headless chickens, running, moving from one shiny object to the next, cosplaying indigeneity, parroting and creating a mishmash of indigenous practices which become New Age cults and cultish behaviors. The mental and emotional instability that comes from this way of behaving speaks to the lack of grounding in one's own ancestral knowledge and the indigenous knowledge they are taking pieces from. The lack of grounding in the Western colonial teaching methodology. This is all at the expense of the living indigenous cultures, by the way. The impact of appropriation, the hurt, no matter how many times we speak up, falls on deaf ears. I still see butchered versions of the Gayatri mantra being paraded around on social media and played aloud in live workshops and classes. The ignorance is astounding. How long will it take for you to research the depths of this mantra? That an incorrect pronunciation can be truly harmful. That initiation is required to even chant it. I still hear audios of it played in gym yoga classes by non-native people, and it gives me the absolute cringe. Mother of God, wake up and put in the effort to learn instead of feeling entitled to take. Ignorance is not a good look for those purporting to be teaching authorities. And if you disagree, please look up the meaning of ethnocide. No one is saying you can't chant it. The ask is to learn and share it respectfully and responsibly. Our culture, by the miracle of Dharma, is not yet wiped out for you to continue to abuse. Another insult to those from the living culture of yoga is to call your gym yoga students yogis. The profound idiocy and disrespect, simply because the teacher is disconnected from the culture she is using for her business. Do you know how many times I've been injured by a white yoga teacher in a physical class because of her assumed authority over my body? Trauma-informed is for the colonized teacher. And there is no trauma-informed yoga. This is made up a made-up bypass of indigenous cultural knowledge. There is, however, a real and strong need to be trauma-informed when you have not learned yoga from an authentic teaching methodology. When you come from your 200 and 500-hour Western trainings, yes, you need to get extra trauma-informed education because this is a Western teaching methodology that is removed from the indigenous framework. So call it trauma-informed facilitation. Otherwise, you're just lying to yourself and everyone else that yoga needs changing, that it needs to improve, that the West has made it better. Stop the farce. Stop the farce. So, after endless harm and ignorance, and clearly it's just going to continue, clearly my position is advocating learning from the source culture, learning the history from the land's own historical and cultural perspective, and not the colonizer perspective, not the propaganda, not the Western academic textbooks. When it comes to spiritual and cultural knowledge, which is embodied, learning from native teachers is an embodied experience. And I'm sorry if you've not experienced that or questioned inner biases and gone out of your way to seek the truth, seek authentic sources. Western or colonized yoga is going to keep you on the hamster wheel of attachment to form and addiction. I have been disrespected by non-native teachers many times, specifically and always white teachers who believe they know more than me about my own culture, better than someone who has been born into it and is living it. So much arrogance after reading textbooks by white men and solely just about the body. You've got to laugh off the frustration of this level of narcissism. The stupidity is just astounding. As you can see on the tone of my voice, I continue to be disgusted by the appropriation and entitlement, and I actually don't wish to discuss it anymore going further, at least after this episode. I need a break from talking about it because it weighs on me. Anyway, it's likely you're on the decolonial path or wish to learn from the indigenous view, which is why you're still listening. And I'm grateful that humble, respectful, and discerning souls exist like you. You're my kind of person. And so I've created a helpful decolonial toolkit related to yoga and Indic history. So download my Dharma and Decolonial toolkit, deepen your unlearning journey, and redirect yourself to the authentic path of yoga, Dharma, and Vedic knowledge. My interest is in regaining Dharma, the spiritual and scientific indigenous knowledge that heals, transforms, and nourishes the body and mind of a person who has forgotten her connection to spirit and nature, her relationship to Shakti, her relationship with the whole cosmos. And so we arrive at Hindu cosmology, the interconnection of self with the universe, the unification of the Atma with the Paramatma, self with the universe, or the primordial consciousness, the yoking together of which is called yoga. I am interested in the wholeness that only an inner practice and inner knowing can provide. And so I created my mentorship program, The Inner Practitioner, a journey to support you in moving away from the standalone gym/fitness or studio yoga practice and into the authentic path of becoming a yoga sadhaka, which was my journey, the journey towards building a relationship with my origins, the ancestors, the indigenous knowledge of yoga, and the learning material to decolonize yoga. I mean, is it even yoga if decoloniality is not the lens through which you meet colonized yoga? So check out the details for my mentorship program, the links in the description. I'm also moving towards a membership group where I will be teaching weekly yoga classes, so let me know if you'd like to be part of this like-hearted community of sensitive, visionary creators. Register your interest now. So coming to the end of this episode, yoga asana is just one fraction of yoga. Movement of poses, holding the postures, this all serves a specific purpose. But it is only a tiny piece of a whole ecosystem of knowledge and practice. So asana is not yoga. It is part of a methodology, a means to the goal of realizing the self. I've said this before, that the colonial mind, the predator, takes from the whole one piece and presents that piece as the whole and wants to be put on a pedestal for it. So let's remember that not even one lifetime is enough to know yoga, to know all of the teachings. And it may not even be our place to know or know it all. When the student is ready, the teacher appears. Start seeking within. And the guru is within, so long as you have repaired the relationship with the fragmented pieces of yourself, when you have uncolonized, questioned everything, met an idea and belief to its very end, and developed through consistent effort a stable mind that can discriminate and think independently, and be able to come to a reasonable conclusion. Thus, the yogic path is not for everyone. It requires behavior and a mindset that is not of the crowd. This quality of effort, hard work, focus, and discipline, tapas, this person who has cultivated a discerning mind and is humble amidst the backdrop of the unknown, this is part of the foundation of what makes a person an adhikari, a person qualified or eligible to practice yoga, let alone teach it. When I was humble enough to surrender the ego to the not knowing, that's when the guru or the next right teacher appeared. Are you a student practitioner, a sadhaka who is ready? Or is there some attachment, something that remains that must be transformed or released in order for the next realization, the next step to appear? I'll leave you with that self-inquiry. Rise up, warrior.